Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be talking all about investment bags and whether I think they're worth the money. I'm going to be specifically talking about the Chanel Classic Flap, although I will be referencing other bags and other brands as well. I will say that this isn't going to be a review video, so if that's what you're looking for, then I will link the classic Chanel Flap guide that I did down below, and that was pretty recent. That should cover most of the aspects, hopefully, that you're looking for. But today's video is going to be more about the investment side, the idea of buying investment, and also my tips as well. So as a little bit of a background, the reason why this video came into being was I was doing research for that video and I was looking at price a lot, and I found out actually just after I filmed it that there had been a second round of price increases in the UK, which is insane because we only just had one. So that's the second round in 3 months, and I believe that the second round was due to the Brexit decision, but that doesn't make it any cheaper. So this bag now retails for almost £4,000, I believe, which is an insane amount of money. In the US, I believe it's around the $5,000 or $5,500 mark, and with tax I think it's closer to $6,000. So either way, a lot of money. And for a bit of context, I bought this 5 years ago and I bought it for $2,500, and that was after another round of price increases. So a few months earlier I just missed the boat, but it was a lot cheaper. I think it was more around the £2,000 mark. So this bag has increased in price a lot, and I just wanted to talk about whether I still thought it was worth the money, because even though my Chanel bags are very, very dear to me and I love Chanel, it's my favourite brand by far, my love for Chanel is not unconditional, and there is a limit to how much I'm willing to pay for a Chanel bag. I did have a Chanel taupe jumbo on my wish list, but now I'm not even sure whether I would go for it even if the perfect one presented itself, because £4,000 for a bag is a lot of money, especially one that cost £2,000 only a few years ago. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I'm going to get stuck right in. So I'm going to be talking about what an investment bag actually is first, and for me an investment bag should be two things. So number one, it should look current for a long time. So we're not talking seasonal bags that are super trendy right now but will look dated in a few months time. We're talking about very classic designs that will look good for many, many years, and closely linked to that is the second point, that they should retain their resale value. So if you did want to sell it after X amount of years, you could sell it either at cost or at a profit. It's also important to note that a bag will generally be considered a better investment if the design house in question continues to raise their prices. This is true across the board usually. Most design houses and most brands in general increase their prices to keep up with inflation, but some brands do it more than others. So for example, Chanel and Louis Vuitton and Hermes, they will raise their prices a lot more than Mulberry or Chloe. They all will, but Chanel price increases are pretty much infamous at this point, and they will raise their prices far above inflation. For this reason, some design houses are safer bets than others. Chanel, I would say, is probably one of the best for investment bags, as is Hermes, and to a lesser extent Louis Vuitton. And then you have all the other brands, so you have, you know, your Chloe's, your Gucci's, and it does seem to fluctuate according to what brand is in fashion, but the three at the top are always Chanel, Hermes and Louis Vuitton. However, another thing that's really important to note is that all bags are not created equal. So just because it comes from Chanel doesn't mean that it's going to have fantastic resale value. I think their Mademoiselle line is a really good example of this. A few years ago, Chanel put a lot of money and marketing efforts into their Mademoiselle line, which was really popular for a couple of seasons, and now the resale value is pretty much non-existent. So you still do have to pick carefully, and generally speaking, the more classic a bag is, such as the Chanel Classic Flap, the better its resale value will be. What determines resale value is whether a bag is still going to be in demand after X amount of years. What dictates whether a bag is going to be in demand is down to so many different forces, including celebrities and press and PR and all that kind of stuff, but also it depends on whether the bag is still available. Louis Vuitton, in my opinion, are particularly bad for this because they release so many different models. They also discontinue a lot of the time as well, so you never really know if a bag that you're buying is going to stay in their permanent collection, with a few exceptions of the Speedy and the Neville and all those kind of models. But a lot of their newer models, you just don't know how long they're going to stay around for, and as soon as a bag is discontinued, it might see a short increase in terms of resale value, but then after that demand will drop, which will mean that the resale value will drop as well. So not all bags are considered equal, and that's really important to keep in mind when looking at buying investment bags. For this reason, limited edition lines tend to do less well, so even if they are really popular and sell out, they will see an initial spike in resale value, but in the years after, usually they do drop and their resale value isn't great just because they're not available and they don't have that kind of buzz to carry it. There are exceptions to this rule, and I can think of one in particular. The Louis Vuitton Watercolor Speedy is still a very desirable and very rare bag, so the resale value is fantastic, but those are exceptions rather than the rule. And one other thing I wanted to mention on the topic of investment bags was that obviously investment bags should not be considered as actual investments. Sometimes I like to pretend to down that they are, but they're not an equivalent for stocks and shares or property or anything like that. We're talking about investment bags in terms of an investment in a piece of clothing or accessory that will see you through many years. So onto the Chanel Classic Flap now, and whether I still think this beautiful bag is still worth it. And I kind of have mixed views on it, because whilst I do love this bag and I recommend it to anyone looking to buy it because it is still my favourite bag after 5 years, and after going through many other bags, this is the one which I keep going back to. It's still a lot of money, and it's just not entirely justifiable that Chanel keep raising the prices. I get why they do it, because they can, and by doing so they also increase the demand and the resale value, and it's kind of vicious circle that they're encouraging here. But essentially, if you've always dreamed of a Chanel Classic Flap and you have your heart set on one, I still say go for it, because there is nothing quite like a Chanel flap, and they are very timeless and they do hold their value really, really well. So it's unlikely you would lose your money on one unless you treated it quite poorly or something happened to it. But generally speaking, they do retain their resale value very well. That said, I am very aware that a Chanel bag is not worth the cost of materials. Clearly this bag does not cost £4,000 to make. I would be surprised if it costs much more than £100 to make. And obviously if you're thinking about it in terms of the actual cost of materials, this bag isn't going to be worth it. And a lot of the money you're paying is for the Chanel brand. You're paying for the PR, you're paying for the celebrities that front the brand, and moreover, I'm paying for the Chanel marketing team to sit in their offices and do their job really well and ensure that demand for this bag and for this brand continues to be really high. And that's just the truth. That's what you're paying for. You're not paying for the materials. But I'm also not distraught at the idea of that. I don't mind the fact that I'm paying for all that stuff, because along with it comes the history of the brand and the integrity and all the little design quirks and everything that Chanel stands for. So I'm okay with that. I know lots of people won't be, but that's something that you do have to accept if you're looking at one of these bags. One thing I want to mention is that I talk about resale value a lot, even for bags I have no intention of reselling. I'd say probably 70 to 80% of my collection I could imagine selling at some point in the future, but there's a 20% that I will never ever sell, and included in that is this Chanel Jumbo, my Chanel Mini, those kind of bags which for me are just my favourites, my classics, and just ones that I go back to time and time again. However, I still talk about resale value because for me it's a really useful indicator of how current the bag is, how popular, how in demand, how in fashion, and all those different elements. So even though I have no intention of reselling this bag, I still think about the resale value for every purchase going forward, as well as purchases that I already have. So I'm going to run over some tips for buying luxury or investment bags now, and the first one is another question I get asked pretty frequently, and that's how you prioritize what bag to buy. So for example, if you have 3 bags that you're lusting after and there's one at the top which is really expensive, should you go for that first, or should you just go for a cheap one, get that out of the way, and then work on saving towards the other one? And for me, I would always say prioritize those which have the largest price increases, and if that happens to be the most expensive one, then go for that. I'd also say go for your holy grail or most favourite one first, because there's also a chance that you might not want any of the others once you have that bag. I know when I bought my Chanel Jumbo, I didn't buy another bag after this for about a year or two after, just because I wasn't interested in looking at any other bags. I love this one so much and I used it so much that I didn't feel the need to even glance at other handbags. This one had made me completely loyal, and that might be true of you as well. So I'd say go for the most expensive with price increases and your holy grail first, and that might be enough. Tip number 2 is to really think through cost per wear of the bag, and if you're really going to get use and value for money from it. A mistake that I've made in the past is buying bags which I thought would make a great addition to my collection, I thought I should be buying, but weren't necessarily going to get that much use, which is why I've ended up with a collection which looks quite similar, and I have quite a few similar bags which I am going to try and rectify, but there's definitely something that I regret doing, in that I didn't always think through the cost per wear accurately enough, and it's just left me with a collection that doesn't always get a lot of use. So it's really important to think through that. My Neverfull is a great example of that. I bought it for £500 I think, and I'm not sure how much it would fetch if I was going to resell it. I suspect not much because it's pretty worn now, but I also don't care. If it fell apart tomorrow, I'd be sad about it, but I wouldn't feel cheated or anything because I've gotten so much use out of it, and I know that that was £500 really well spent. So even if you don't like any of the investment bag brands, you know, if you don't like Chanel or Hermes or Louis Vuitton, go for a Gucci or go for whatever it is that you like. Just make sure that you get enough value for money out of it and enough use out of it, and that will justify the cost in itself. Tip number 3 is to really think very hard if you're buying a bag just to resell. I'm not talking about a bag that you love which you think will have a good resale value 5 years down the line. I'm talking about just bags that you're only buying to buy it and then resell it. If you're a reseller, obviously that's totally different, but if you're just someone that enjoys bags and think you can make a bit of money off it, think carefully about it, because I've done that a couple of times in the past and it's never really worked out. Selling is also quite a bit of a hassle. There's always risk involved. You never know if you're going to get your money back, especially with sellers' fees. It's never really straightforward, and I don't really think there are any great options in terms of selling. So think carefully if that is a route that you want to go down. I'm a firm believer that it's better to have one amazing bag than it is to have 5 average bags that you're not fully in love with. I'm not knocking lower price bags here because I really think you can get beautiful bags at any price point. One of my favourite bags at the moment is the Tory Burch Perry Tote, something I've been using consistently, is amazing value for money. You can definitely still find beautiful ones even below that price point, and there are beautiful ones above it as well. So it just depends what's right for you, but I always think it's worthwhile going for that one thing that you really love, because that will make you so much happier, I think, than all the other things that you like but you don't love. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts on the investment bag debate down below. I'm always interested to hear your opinions. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.